right, welcome back to the Nexus Podcast, day 2 of Black Hat, and I'm here with Noam Moshe. This is, 3 years in a row we've done one of these, maybe more?
3 years in Vegas. I think we did one in Europe as well.
Yes, you're right. How you doing?
Yeah, doing good. Black Hat is full of cool, amazing people, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's definitely my favorite show of the year for sure. And as we're talking, your talk was a little less than 24 hours ago. I'm sure there's a little relief there that you're done, and well, at least till DEF CON. But
yeah, exactly. We have the DEF CON talk as well,
right.
So I don't get too long of a break.
It's a fun show though, and I mean it's a perfect audience for what Team82 does. So.
Yeah, I think Black Hat is right in our ballpark,
Sure.
And DEF CON as well. I mean, it's different communities. Some of it collide, some of it is different. So it's always fun being in both.
Right. So all right, so let's talk about the research that went into your talk yesterday. Basically, hacking the platform around a very popular video surveillance vendor called Axis Communications. There's a whole disclosure process. So before we talk about the technical details, there was a point you made at the end of your talk about how a lot of Chinese companies sell a lot of these cameras and this surveillance equipment, and it's getting banned. And I think it's really interesting that you guys kind of looked at this platform, because I think this work needs to start happening if these very popular Chinese products aren't available anymore for a lot of companies in the West.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that at the end of the day, that's what triggered our research. We noticed that more and more companies, different equipment, devices are getting banned from being heavily used. Right. And we thought to ourselves, okay, that's probably leads to a very small option group for each company. And this is why we have big companies that are deployed in dozens and thousands of different organizations out there in the world. And by identifying vulnerabilities in this centralized point, basically what's left for users to choose from, you are able to gain huge impact from only one vulnerability chain. Right. And you can exploit dozens, thousands of different companies.
Like you pointed out in your talk, I mean, sure, one company is buying Axis, but they might have 100 Axis cameras or whatever company, and then if there's a bug in one, there's a bug in all, and you get instant scale.
Exactly, and I mean, usually I try and take a look at this centralized platform that basically are supposed to manage your fleet of devices. Right. And then if you are able to exploit and take over the centralized platform, you immediately gain the keys to the kingdom, and you are the owner of all the devices that it in turn manage, which is super cool, super relevant for attackers, and this is how they behave and how they think.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about Axis Communication and how you landed on looking at them, because I think it's an interesting part of the story as well.
Sure. So basically, Axis is one of the leading vendor in the world of video surveillance. They are aiming mainly at the enterprise grade of equipment, meaning it is not a home user camera. It is more of a big company type of devices. And because they are aiming at companies that will have a fleet of devices, not just one IP camera that is viewing my living room, but instead it is different physical location, warehouses, offices, floors, you name it. Then we need to have a centralized location to manage and control and actually consume the video feed of our entire camera fleet. And this was exactly what we targeted. We targeted the Axis Device Manager and Axis Camera Stations, which are essentially the servers that control and manage your camera fleets. And in the process, we discovered a very unique, very proprietary, undocumented protocol that is used to communicate between the client and server of this kind of services in Axis. This protocol is called Axis Remoting, and we managed to uncover the very cool vulnerability chain that enables full pre-auth remote code execution on the server. And just like you said, in turn, it allows us to pivot into all the different IP cameras that the server manages.
So were the vulnerabilities exclusively in the protocol or in the implementation of the protocol?
So it's both. At the end of the day, Axis Remoting is a full encrypted JSON-based protocol. It has some binary header, but mainly it's JSON. And in its core, it is essentially an RPC protocol, basically allowing an Axis client to invoke some kind of functionality on the server. For example, if the client wants to log in, then they'll call via the RPC communication the login function on the server. And in this process, we managed to uncover a deserialization vulnerability, very classic vulnerability in .NET applications. And essentially in .NET, having a deserialization immediately leads to code execution. There's no need for known gadgets, stuff like that. It is immediately leading to code execution, which means you're able to create arbitrary classes on the server's memory space and lead to code execution.
Mm-hmm.
And since the vulnerabilities are protocol level, they affect both the client and the server. Meaning by having, for example, a man-in-the-middle connection, you are able to attack both endpoints, meaning you execute code on the client and on the server, which is super, super cool.
So you said one keyword there, encrypted. So you sit man in the middle, you steal the traffic, capture the traffic. How are you able to decrypt it? What are you looking for? Are you looking for the credentials? Are you looking for what are you looking for in the packets?
So in its core, Axis uses NTLM SSP, basically NTLM challenge response, to authenticate valid users. And yeah, the protocol is encrypted, meaning and by the way, it's encrypted using MTLS, meaning both endpoints need to authenticate using a valid certificate. However, by setting up a MTLS man in the middle, meaning a server that exposes a TLS port and creates a new TLS connection, we are able to fully decrypt the traffic.
Okay.
And that way, we are able to view clear text what's going on under the hood. Now, this man-in-the-middle attack is only one approach we took because, like you can guess, it requires some sort of man-in-the-middle setup, meaning you need to be able to wiretap and actually interact with the session. And this enables you to attack both the client and the server, bypassing the NTLM SSP and doing sort of a pass the hash, pass the challenge attack, allowing you to bypass the authentication and cause deserialization in both endpoints. Now, in addition to that, we've uncovered another approach which enables you to directly attack the server and bypass the authentication in another form, using a different protocol, basically a fallback protocol that was susceptible to the same vulnerabilities. And that way, you don't need man-in-the-middle at all. You can directly attack a server without needing any man-in-the-middle setup, interaction, user interaction, one-click, credentials, prior knowledge, nothing.
Right.
You can directly attack a server and gain full remote code execution.
So your whole aim was to get pre-authentication or
Exactly.
remote code execution, and you didn't get there at first. You kept kind of hammering away at it.
Exactly. During the research process, we began man-in-the-middling the connection to actually try and understand the protocol, because at the end of the day, access remoting is a proprietary protocol. It is completely undocumented, and we wanted to have a way to dissect it and to be able to do static protocol analysis, and that way we can learn and glimpse about the protocol. And to do that, we've created the man-in-the-middle setup, and we began man-in-the-middling the connection, and that's when we discovered the deserialization vulnerability, the pass the hash vulnerability, you name it. However, yeah, the end goal was having full pre-auth remote code execution, essentially the holy grail when it comes to vulnerability research, allowing you to attack any target you are able to connect to.
Right.
And this is what we managed to achieve.
So maybe let's start at the beginning, kind of. So I know that I believe from the research blog, there are 6,500 of these exposed that you could see on like an internet scan. Just kind of, how did this start? Because that's how you kind of landed on the protocol, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, when an adversary wants to target a company, they will usually look and search for internet-exposed devices and internet-exposed services. And in our case, this was access remoting. Now, at the beginning of our research, we had no idea what access remoting was or even what access is. However, we discovered that many organizations expose the access remoting port onto the internet. And the reason for that is to enable remote connectivity. At the end of the day, if you have a fleet of cameras and fleet of devices and even maybe different physical locations, you want to be able to access, to view, to consume the feed and see the status, keep alive, and see that everything works as intended. And this is why many companies expose this service online. And essentially, because the service, the access remoting service, is fully encrypted with TLS and is fully authenticated with NTLM SSP, there is this misconception that it's inherently secured.
Right.
And just because it's encrypted, it does not mean you can expose it directly online. And this is exactly what kind of research we wanted to demonstrate.
And so when you found it, you start to put together the infrastructure, the server, the client side. Was it pretty clear that there was an issue with the protocol? I mean,
Yeah, once we managed to basically unwrap the traffic, we saw that the RPC is probably susceptible to a deserialization vulnerability. And by reverse engineering and looking at the binaries, we managed to confirm it. And we built a very simplistic payload exploiting the deserialization vulnerability using open source tools. However, the difficult part was actually being able to use it in the access remoting protocol, because the access remoting, once again, it's a very complicated protocol. It requires handshake, authentication, etc. And to actually exploit and inject your payload, you need to basically jump over a bar.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to that, even when we managed to exploit it, we still had the authentication issue, meaning to actually talk with access remoting protocol, you need to be authenticated to the server. This means that you need to have valid credentials and make the vulnerability not pre-auth. So we pivoted our way in the research trying to achieve the authentication bypass and to actually be able to communicate in access remoting without having valid credentials.
Sounds like there's a lot of security built into this protocol, and I mean, it may not have been 100% safe, but it sounds like there was a bit there.
At the end of the day, everything has vulnerabilities. Sure. I mean, any product that you put enough time into, you'll uncover vulnerabilities. The main question is how the company approaches the fixing of these vulnerabilities. And when we contacted Access, they obviously were super professional, super security-minded, and they rush to make sure their clientele are protected. However, just having the vulnerabilities is not a black mark. I mean, everything has vulnerabilities.
Right.
The main stumble of reaching the vulnerabilities was understanding the protocol. And because everything was fully encrypted, it was not obvious as to simply wiretapping the connection and seeing that there might be deserialization on wire. So the main hurdle we had to jump across is analyzing the access remoting protocol.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, after we had the deserialization vulnerability, the main question was how can we exploit it in a pre-authenticated context.
Right.
And to do that, we used a legacy fallback protocol that is supported by access remoting, which is essentially what the clients use when they can't reach via the default protocol. Mm-hmm. And this protocol is completely different. It is over HTTP. There is public, there is key exchange, and everything is encrypted. However, it has the same core issues of deserialization because it uses, under the hood, it still uses the access remoting protocol.
Right. I should probably have asked already. Give me the very high-level explanation of what a deserialization vulnerability is, because it's pretty dangerous, right?
Sure, yeah. So essentially, deserialization and serialization, which is the opposite, is the process of taking classes in memory and transforming them into a representation that could be passed along between different computers. So say, for example, you have an in-memory object and you want to pass it in a socket. You can't obviously pass the memory itself because it's in your memory. It's not real. Yeah. So you do the serialization process of basically translating the complicated object that is composed of different primitive members like strings, integers, longs, stuff like that. You make it into a binary or textual representation, making sure you are able to transmit it over the wire, over files, etc. Now, deserialization is the opposite process. You take the members, the different field that compose the complicated object, and you reconstruct the object in your memory space. Okay. Meaning, for example, if you have an object of a user with username and password, which are both string, you reconstruct the username object in your memory space and recreate the object. Now, this process could be dangerous if the client has control over what kind of classes will be created. Because at the end of the day, this enables the client to create arbitrary classes, and some classes could lead to side effects, including code execution. And this is exactly the kind of deserialization vulnerability in .NET that enables attackers to create arbitrary classes in the server's memory space. And by creating the classes, they can invoke some kind of dangerous functionality that could lead to remote code execution.
Got it. So, I mean, we've talked about so far as basically getting access, getting on the devices. What does the actual attack look like? What does the attacker do once they're on?
So, essentially, the attackers first targets the server and gains a foothold over the server via the vulnerabilities. Essentially, they get RC. Now, once they control the server, they have the keys to the kingdom. They now can communicate, control, they have credentials to all the camera fleets that are managed by the server. Now, specifically in Axis, you can use built-in features which are called packages. Essentially, this is a way for Axis to enable you to build modularity to your cameras by adding different code bases, packages, onto your cameras, allowing you to control their behavior in a modular way. Now, Axis has fully fledged SDK that enables you to fully build your own packages, and by supplying malicious packages, you are able to jump from the management server to the cameras directly. By injecting them with a backdoor package, you are able to execute arbitrary code on the cameras as well.
So the packages are a legitimate use, like an admin would use these for some purpose?
Exactly. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with having the modularity and allowing administrators to add packages and basically modify the behavior of their equipment. And yeah, it is completely legitimate because at the end of the day, we need to remember that the main usage of the Axis management server is to manage the cameras.
Right.
And with that comes a big attack surface. And by using completely legitimate server features, you are able to control and execute code on the cameras themselves.
So you were able to develop an exploit chain. Were there issues? Were there issues on the server or the camera? Is it strictly the protocol? Like, tell me a little bit about the chain.
So
aspect.
essentially, what you need to do is to start talking in the fallback protocol supported by Axis. It differs by port, by different specific product line. If it's Axis camera station or device manager, it differs in the port. However, essentially what you do is that you create an HTTP connection to the server, telling them, hey, I want to communicate with you over Axis remoting. We discovered a hidden path in the HTTP server that enables you to actually start talking Axis remoting without having proper credentials, meaning you are able to start speaking in the Axis remoting protocol. Now, the actual protocol that is used by the client and the server via the fallback mechanism is not plain HTTP. It is not accessible via web browser, and instead they essentially implemented raw binary sockets, fully encrypted with full key exchange between the client and the server, but essentially they implemented two sockets, one for TX transmission and one for RX receiving, allowing the client and the server to send messages to one another. And that way, after the key exchange, they are able to transmit and receive messages fully encrypted and communicate via the Axis remoting protocol.
Is that an unusual way to do it with the two sockets like that?
It is fairly unusual. I mean, it's not fully groundbreaking. At the end of the day, they chose to implement raw binary sockets over HTTP, which is a bit unusual, and obviously does not conform to the HTTP RFC. It's not like you can use a browser to access the server in that format, and instead you need to use the Axis client or implement it on your own, which we did.
So what can an attacker do once they're on? I mean, are we talking about just like kind of shutting off banks of cameras, manipulating part of it, or just is it a jumping off point to the rest of the network?
So essentially, they can do whatever. The first thing is that they could use both the server and the cameras as a pivot point into different parts of an organization's network. And because we are talking a fleet of cameras, each one could be in a different physical location, in different VLAN, you name it, and they could use it as a pivot point to move laterally in the organization's network. However, another approach is to obstruct the legitimate usage of the camera. At the end of the day, the camera's purpose is to have some kind of physical access control and allow you to view and consume live feed of what's happening in your building or warehouses, etc. So for sure, an attacker could exploit the camera and alter the video feed, stopping it, crushing it, and even altering it however they choose once they gain full control of the cameras. So the answer is both. An attacker can use it to move laterally or even to modify and alter the camera feed.
And do you have a sense for where they're selling these cameras and these systems? Or is it just commercial use, or is it like government facilities?
So it's a wide range, ranging from commercial, big companies, educational facilities, medical institution, and of course government. Basically, anyone who needs to have a Western brand video surveillance that is geared towards major companies and major facilities is a possible user of access.
So with a research project like this, how long are we talking, like from day one, kind of discovering this protocol online to when you have the full working chain? Or are we talking months, weeks?
So it really depends from project to project and how well the research evolved. In this case, we are talking a few weeks to a couple of months from start to finish. However, it really differs from project to project, based on complexity, based on the focus point that you choose on as a researcher, etc. So it doesn't really mean the amount of time put into a research does not directly translate to how tough of a target it was.
And I guess we should talk about the disclosure process a little bit. I know you said that Access was very professional and cooperative in this, but I get the sense that it's still not always as amiable as it could be with certain vendors. And we don't have to talk about certain, specific vendors, but that's just the whole process.
So, in general, I think the community is moving in the correct way. And more companies are setting up assertive, dedicated people that their job description is to work with the community, work with researchers, and process vulnerability reports. And we do see an increase in number of companies that choose to have it in their workforce. While that's the case, we still have the outliers and companies that are less responsive, less prone to listen to researchers, or simply didn't have the prior experience and have not set up a proper channel of communication with researchers. Now, in Access case, I can tell you I've done more than a few dozens of vulnerability disclosures, and this was one of the better experience I've had. Access has a communication channel directly to report them vulnerabilities to, and we've worked with them, and we got very good responses, and we saw how they prioritize and how they care about their product security line. And from the start of disclosure to patches being released, we're talking as soon as possible. Some of them were a few weeks. Some took a bit longer. It really depends on the kind of patch that was needed to put in place. However, for sure. But at the end of the day, they prioritized it, understanding the possible risk of such vulnerability.
I mean, I think it's important to tell these stories because not that long ago, researchers like yourself were getting threatened with lawsuits or worse, and from vendors. And I mean, that's definitely not happening as often. But it's good to tell this side of the story, I think.
Exactly, and I mean, I believe there should be credit where credit is due. And in this case, for sure, you can see the maturity and the security maturity of the company. Yeah. And Axis is a great example of how you should do responsible disclosure.
Is this your favorite kind of research, doing like the connected devices, the IoT stuff? I know Team82's legacy is OT, but you certainly have been branching out into more of these kinds of devices, the cloud, etc.
So we do all sorts of research, as you know the best. And the answer is yeah. Me personally, I love the impact that is possible via attacking IoT devices. And I think we also see adversaries starting to focus more and more on IoT as like a hidden gem, allowing them to move laterally, stay undetected, etc. in big organizations' network. And at the end of the day, if we're talking cloud, if we're talking network exposure, if we're talking effect, IoT is one of the best there is to showcase such example. However, we still do a lot of OT, old school, PLC, HMI, you name it, and obviously medical. So we try and keep doing everything as much as we can.
So kind of as our last thought, just you mentioned cloud. As more OT ends up in the cloud processing all that data, all these cyber physical systems that are cranking out all of this data for a lot of different purposes, how much is that changing kind of the attack surface, the risk that's involved?
So I think at the end of the day, when we're talking about OT, we need to remember that the old school approach was serial connection.
Right.
Everything was needed to be connected directly via wire. And basically, this reduced the attack surface on every device significantly because you could not connect and communicate with it remotely. You need to have physical access. You need to be physically touching or connected to a wire that's connected to the device. However, with the introduction of IP networking and even more with cloud, we are seeing more and more devices which have kind of unintended, unexplored attack surface. And this is for sure one thing we are noticing. Yeah. And not only us, also attackers and also even companies. They realize that by exposing your equipment, you are introducing risk, and you should have the appropriate remediation put in place to make sure the risk is not unmanaged.
All right. Good place to leave it, I think. All right. Good to see you. Congratulations on the talk. I know it went really very well.
Thank you. Always fun talking, coming here, and engaging with the community in general.
All right, man. I'm sure we'll do another one someday. So, thanks.